My name is Odelyn, and yesterday I walked out of the house that raised me for good. It didn't happen the way I imagined it would. There was no dramatic screaming, no slamming of doors, no suitcase thrown down the stairs. It was quiet, controlled. But the damage? That wasn't quiet at all. That part tore through me like a knife I didn't see coming. It started with my sister, Lissa. She had always been the golden one, the one who made all the noise, all the mess, and still somehow ended up with the praise. I was the fixer, the calm one, the one who kept her secrets, cleaned up after her mistakes, and smiled through every bruise she left behind on the family's name. But yesterday, something changed. She was yelling again, this time over something small, something ridiculous, a loan, a favor, something she thought I owed her, just because I had finally gotten a stable job, a quiet apartment, a life of my own. And when I said no, calmly, firmly, the way I'd practiced in therapy, she exploded. "You've ruined this family," she screamed across the kitchen, eyes wild. "You think you're better than everyone else now just because you moved out and got a paycheck? You're selfish. You ruined everything." I was stunned, but what shocked me more wasn't her words. It was the silence that followed. My mother stood behind her, arms crossed. My father leaned against the wall, his eyes hard but unreadable. Neither of them said a word, so I asked, barely above a whisper, "Are you really going to let her talk to me like that?" And my mother who used to hold me when I cried after Lissa's tantrums, nodded. "She's just expressing herself, Odelyn," she said, as if that made it okay. "She's right," my father added, finally speaking. "You've changed since you left. You think you're too good for us now?" That was the moment something snapped inside me, not from pain, not from anger, from clarity. They weren't on my side. They never had been. And so, I left. Quietly. No scene. Just keys on the table and the words I had been too scared to say for years. I'm done. When I stepped outside, the air felt heavier than usual, not because of the weather, but because I knew something final had just happened. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. I walked to my car, slid behind the wheel, and drove. No music, no calls, just silence and the sound of my own thoughts slamming against the walls of my mind. I didn't go home right away. I parked outside a quiet diner on the edge of town, the kind that stays open 24 hours but rarely sees customers after midnight. I sat there for almost an hour, staring out at the dark, empty road. I kept playing the moment over and over again. In my head, Lissa's voice rising, my mother's quiet betrayal, my father's disappointment like a brick to the chest. I had spent my entire life trying to be the stable one, the one who didn't cause trouble, the one who kept everything together. And yet when I finally stood up for myself, when I dared to say no, they made me the villain. I thought leaving would hurt more. But what hurt the most was how easy it was for them to let me go. No one followed me. No one called that night. No, "Are you okay?" No, "Please come back." And that told me everything I needed to know. So I went home, to my apartment, my space, my silence. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty for choosing it. I curled up on the couch, still in my jacket, and let myself breathe. Just breathe. Not perform, not protect, not explain. The next morning, I woke up to 14 missed calls. My phone screen was littered with them, mostly from my mom, a few from my sister, one from a number I didn't recognize, maybe my father using the office line. My chest tightened as I stared at them. I didn't listen to the voicemails. Not yet. Because I knew what they would say. "Come back. You misunderstood. You're being dramatic." Or worse, the kind of apology that's really just a demand in disguise. I placed my phone face down on the table and stood up. I made coffee. I opened a window. I let the morning in without letting them in. For once, I wasn't going to rush into fixing things. For once, I was going to see what life looked like without the weight of constantly managing other people's chaos. I didn't return any of the calls. Not that day, not the next. And as much as my fingers hovered over the screen, tempted, aching to respond, I didn't. I knew what would happen if I did. They'd pull me back into that cycle again. Guilt, manipulation, apology without change, and then reset. Just enough warmth to confuse me. Just enough blame to keep me quiet. And I was done. That night, I journaled for the first time in months. I opened an old leather-bound notebook I used to carry everywhere in college. The first page was filled with ideas and dreams, but now I was writing something different. Truths I had never said out loud. I wasn't the problem, I wrote. I was just the easiest one to blame. I've been the emotional sponge for this family my entire life. I'm allowed to leave. The words poured out faster than I could think. Memories I had buried under being the bigger person started resurfacing. Lissa getting caught cheating and blaming it on me. And our parents believing her? My mother crying in the kitchen after another one of Lissa's meltdowns, only to turn around and ask me to be the peacemaker. My dad's silent stares. Not anger, not sadness, just disappointment in who I wasn't. I wasn't loud. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't fragile enough to fuss over. I was invisible, reliable, unbreakable, until I broke. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I turned on my phone. More calls, more texts. One from my mother read, "Lissa didn't mean it. She was just upset. Please come talk to us." Another from Lissa herself. "So this is what you do now? Run away and ghost us like you're some victim?" There it was. That classic shift. From guilt-tripping to gaslighting in one breath. I didn't reply. Instead, I did something I never thought I'd do. I blocked Lissa's number. Not out of spite, but protection. I didn't owe her access to me. And then, something strange happened. I sat with my coffee in silence, watching the city come alive outside my window. And I smiled. Not a big movie scene smile, just a quiet, tired one. The kind that says, "This is hard, but it's mine." The quiet was unfamiliar at first, not just in my apartment, in my mind. There were no buzzing thoughts about what Lissa might say next, no second-guessing every word I'd spoken, no inner voice telling me to call my parents and patch it all up. The silence wasn't empty. It was peaceful. I started doing small things for myself, the kinds of things I'd postponed for years. I reorganized my bookshelf, not because anyone would see it, but because I wanted to. I bought a new pair of running shoes and actually used them. I went to a small art exhibit downtown and walked through it slowly, without rushing, without updating anyone, without asking permission. I wasn't escaping anymore. I was arriving. One afternoon, I met up with my old friend Mila for coffee. She had been one of the few people who knew how hard things had been with my family over the years. And when I told her what had happened, she just nodded like she'd been expecting it. "You finally chose yourself," she said gently, stirring her drink. "You think they're panicking now because they miss you, but really, they miss controlling you." That hit hard. And it was true. For the first time, I wasn't being their emotional buffer. I wasn't cleaning up after Lissa. I wasn't trying to mediate things I didn't cause. I had removed myself from the battlefield, and they didn't know how to function without me there. "They're calling now," Mila continued, "because they realized they lost their favorite doormat, not their favorite daughter." I didn't flinch at her honesty. I needed it. Too many people had sugar-coated my family's behavior over the years. Too many times I was told, "But she's your sister," or "They're your parents. They love you in their own way." I was tired of pretending that love should always be forgiven, no matter how much it hurts. That night, I sat on my balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city lights flicker like stars that belonged only to me. I wasn't lonely. I wasn't broken. I was free. And for the first time in my life, I started wondering, what does my life look like when I'm not trying to be someone else's glue? I didn't have the full answer, but I was finally ready to find out. A few days passed without contact. No calls, no messages, just silence. And I thought, maybe they finally got the message. Maybe they realized I wasn't coming back this time, not unless something changed. Not unless I was seen as more than just the background character in someone else's drama. But that illusion broke on a rainy Thursday morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping my coffee and drafting an email, when I heard the buzz. A single notification. Then 2. Then 3. By the time I checked my phone, there were 5 missed calls from my mom, followed by a text. "Please, it's Lissa. She's not okay. We need you." My stomach dropped. My first instinct was panic, the kind that makes your fingers fumble. Just opening the screen. And then, like clockwork, came the old wiring. This is your moment to step in. Be the responsible one. Fix it. But I stopped myself. I had spent years responding to emergencies that were never mine to solve. Was this one of them? Or just another storm manufactured by chaos and guilt? I didn't respond. Not right away. Instead, I called Mila. "What? If she's actually in trouble?" I asked, pacing my apartment, every part of me on edge. What if this time it's real and I ignore it? Mila didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was steady, measured. If it's truly real, Odelyn, the message wouldn't be vague and manipulative. It would be clear, direct, there'd be accountability. But the way they're framing it, it's bait, and they know exactly what to say to make you jump. She was right. Deep down, I knew it. It was always the same pattern. Something would happen, some breakdown, some meltdown, and I was the fallback plan. The one who could be guilted into cleaning up. But this time, I didn't want to clean up anything. I sat with the message for hours, turning it over in my head. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that caring and sacrificing aren't the same thing. I could care about my sister's well-being. I could even hope she was okay, but I didn't owe them my peace. That night, I drafted a message, not to Lissa, to my mother. "I'm sorry things are difficult right now. I truly hope Lissa is okay. But I can't be the one to fix it anymore. I've spent years breaking myself into pieces for this family. I'm done bleeding quietly while everyone else gets to scream." I read it 3 times before hitting send, and when I did, I didn't feel guilt. I felt powerful. Not because I had turned my back on them, but because, for the first time, I had chosen myself over the version of me they needed me to be. I thought after sending that message, I'd feel anxious or even guilty. Maybe I'd wake up the next morning questioning everything, regretting drawing such a hard line. But I didn't. I slept deeply, peacefully. It was the kind of sleep that comes when you've stopped carrying something heavy. Something you weren't even supposed to hold in the first place. The next morning, I checked my phone. One message. From my father. "Your mother is hurt. She doesn't understand how you can be so cold. We raised you better." And there it was. Not concern, not curiosity, not a real attempt at conversation, just another push of guilt, wrapped in the illusion of love. They weren't reaching out to repair anything. They just couldn't believe I wasn't playing my role anymore. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat down and wrote a letter. Not one I planned to send, just something I needed to say for myself. Something honest. Something true. Dear Mom and Dad, I was never the cold one. I was the quiet one. The one who picked up pieces in the background while Lissa yelled and you turned away. I made peace for everyone else while living in silence myself. You taught me how to survive, but not how to be seen. This version of me, the one you're calling cold, she's not cold. She's awake. She's done bleeding for people who don't ask if she's still alive underneath it all. And for the first time, she's not afraid to let the silence speak for her. When I finished writing, I folded the letter and tucked it into the back of my notebook. I didn't need them to read it. I needed me to read it. Later that evening, Mila invited me to a small dinner party. It was nothing fancy, just a few friends, some music, warm lights, good conversation. But it felt like a different world. Everyone there was so calm, present. There was no chaos, no emotional landmines buried beneath small talk. I found myself laughing, real, unfiltered laughter, the kind that doesn't come with second-guessing or guilt. One of Mila's friends, a woman named Harper, asked me what I did for a living. I told her about my work, and she listened, really listened, like it mattered. And when I finished, she smiled and said, "That sounds important. You must be proud of what you've built." No one had ever said that to me. Not like that. Not without comparison, not without conditions. Driving home that night, I realized I wasn't missing my family. I was missing a version of love that never existed. And now I was slowly learning what real love, peaceful, quiet, safe love, actually looked like. It had been nearly a month since I walked out of my parents' house. No more calls came after that last message. No more guilt trips, no dramatic apologies, just silence. And strangely, it wasn't cold or painful. It was calm, like the world had stopped spinning around someone else's expectations, and I could finally hear my own voice. I started spending more time doing the things I loved without explaining them to anyone. I joined a weekend writing group. I finally signed up for the pottery class I'd postponed for 2 years. I stopped apologizing for saying no, for protecting my time, for keeping my peace. And the more I said no to them, the more I said yes, to myself. One Sunday morning, I was walking through the park near my apartment, coffee in hand, when I passed a mother and daughter on a bench. The girl couldn't have been more than 10. She was crying, softly but deeply. The mother wasn't scolding, she wasn't rushing her. She just held her daughter's hand and listened. That simple image hit me harder than I expected, not because I envied it, but because I understood what it was supposed to feel like. And I had finally made peace with the fact that I didn't get that growing up. But I had something now that my younger self never did. A choice. A choice to break the pattern. A choice to create space where I was safe, even if it was one I built alone. A choice to stop asking people to choose me and start choosing myself. That night, I sat down at my dining table. Lights dim, candles burning, soft music playing, and wrote 3 words on the first page of a fresh journal. I came back, not to them, not to the house I left, but to me. I came back to the version of myself that had been waiting, quietly, patiently, for someone to stop performing and start living. And this time, I was staying. A few weeks later, I was walking through a weekend market, something I used to avoid because it felt unproductive. But now, I let myself slow down. I paused at the flower stalls, ran my fingers across fabric textures, and chatted with vendors about nothing that mattered. And yet, it all did. I wasn't chasing healing anymore. I was living in it. Sometimes healing isn't a grand gesture or a final confrontation. Sometimes it's making tea in silence, opening your blinds in the morning, or not flinching when your phone buzzes with a name that once controlled your whole mood. Speaking of which, one day it did buzz. It was Lissa. Just her name, no message, no voicemail. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger or fear or obligation, just distance, the healthy kind. I didn't respond, not out of spite, out of clarity. I no longer felt the need to re-enter a space where my value had to be negotiated. That version of me, the one who would have called back, begged for understanding, tried to mediate, she no longer lived here. In her place was someone softer, wiser, and, finally, at peace. And in that stillness, I understood something I'd never been told. Walking away isn't about giving up. It's about choosing to breathe. A month turned into 2, and the silence from my family no longer echoed. It simply existed, like distant traffic, still there, but no longer consuming. I had started writing again. Nothing big, just small essays, reflections, a few pages each. Day about things I had spent years avoiding. I wrote about anger, about guilt, about being the good daughter, and how it had quietly broken me piece by piece. One night, I wrote something that stopped me cold. They didn't shatter me. I shattered myself trying to be loved by people who only noticed me when I broke. I stared at that sentence for a long time. I had never admitted that, not even to myself. But now I could. Not with shame, but with understanding. I wasn't that version of me anymore. I was finally becoming someone new, someone who didn't apologize for needing space, who didn't shrink to make others comfortable, someone who wasn't afraid to say, I love you, but I won't destroy myself for you. And the most surprising part, life didn't fall apart when I stopped performing. My circle got smaller, yes, but it got safer. I found a new rhythm, slower, quieter, more mine. I made new friends, people who didn't care about titles or performance, or drama, just honesty. One evening, Mila and I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by candles and half-eaten takeout. She turned to me and said, "You're glowing." I laughed. "I think I'm just breathing." "You weren't before," she said quietly. She was right. I had been surviving, appeasing, managing everyone's chaos while ignoring my own. But now I was healing. Not perfectly, not dramatically, just steadily. And maybe that's what real recovery looks like. Not walking into the sunset, but sitting in the quiet, unbothered, unchased, and finally free to exist without performance. There was no dramatic breakthrough, no moment where everything magically made sense. But little by little, I noticed something changing. I no longer braced myself when my phone buzzed. I no longer rehearsed conversations in my head before saying no. I no longer explained why I needed boundaries. I just had them, and I kept them. That was new. One morning, while folding laundry, I realized I hadn't thought about my parents or Lissa in days. Not in a bitter way, not in avoidance, just they weren't in the center anymore. The silence between us wasn't loud now. It was quiet like peace, not tension, and in that silence, I had built something. A new routine, a gentler way of living, a version of myself that didn't exist for the role of the reliable one. I had always been their backdrop. Now, I was my own main character. I still thought about Lissa sometimes, not with anger, but with distance, with clarity. If she ever apologized, really apologized, I'd listen. But I wasn't waiting for that anymore. I wasn't keeping space open that she never cared to fill. I had learned something essential in all of this. Some people don't hate you. They hate your boundaries, because your peace exposes their chaos, and your silence makes their noise louder. So they call you cold, difficult, selfish. But what you really are is free. I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped walking toward people who set fire to my side and called it love. And maybe one day they'll realize what they lost when I left. But even if they don't, I won't go back to convince them. Because this life I'm building, it may be quiet, it may be small, but it's mine, and for the first time in my life, that's more than enough. I didn't walk away to hurt them. I walked away to save me. Months had passed. Not one call came through anymore. The notifications stopped. The texts dried up. Even the guilt, once loud and consuming, had gone still. And that silence, it didn't ache. It healed. I found a rhythm in solitude, in small things, evening walks, watering plants, saying no without flinching, laughing without checking if someone else approved. I no longer needed the old version of love they offered. Love with conditions, control, shame baked into every word. One afternoon, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and whispered something I hadn't dared to say in years. I'm proud of you, not because I had done something extraordinary, but because I had chosen to stay when it mattered. Not for them, but for myself. I had stood in the fire, seen who would let me burn, and walked out carrying only the truth. I didn't leave to make a point. I didn't stay away for revenge. I simply chose to no longer abandon myself for the comfort of others. That decision, quiet, unannounced, saved me. And if anyone ever asked what happened, what went wrong, what broke the bond between a daughter and the people who raised her, I'd say, I asked for respect. They called it betrayal. And that was all I needed to know. I still don't know if they'll ever change. But I've changed. And that's enough. Because peace, once earned, is a kind of wealth no one can take back. Not even the people you loved first. Not even the ones who taught you how to disappear. Now I know how to stay with myself and I'm never leaving again.